Joining us today to tell us a little bit about Gold Torch Society is Kristen Howard and Shauna Hill.
Thank you, Trish, and welcome everyone. So glad you could be here to listen to Megan. The Gold Torch Society is an undergraduate, it's a program for undergraduate women and alumni women that are graduates of Kearney State or UNK, where we match them together and foster relationships. And so we try to match people based on their career choice, nurses with nursing students, teachers, and so forth. And it's just been a great program for the past 20 years. We just celebrated our 20th year anniversary, where we've been able to connect students and alumni women and foster relationships and grow. So that is why we are so excited for Megan. And Shauna, would you like to add anything?
Yes, so for our new class for students, the applications are going out at the beginning of February, and we will have a due date of March 11th, but we're also always looking for mentors. So if you are part of this group and if you would like to mentor a student, or if you know somebody who might be interested, I know that we'll be sending out a follow-up email of the YouTube video for this presentation, and we can include our email addresses for that. The Gold Torch weekend this year will be November 11th and 12th, and we are so excited. So if you're interested in that, please let Kristen and I know.
Thank you so much for kicking us off, Shauna and Kristen. It's now my pleasure to introduce Meghan Barp. Meghan breaks barriers, not just for herself, but for the communities and families that she serves. After receiving her degree in Human Development and Relationships with a minor in Women's and Gender Studies from UNK in 1999, she earned a master's from Oregon State University. Meghan is a Kimball, Nebraska native and moved east and started her career in 2002 with the YWCA of the City of New York. From there, she spent time with the Federation of Employment and Guidance Services in New York before serving in various roles, including as the Senior Vice President of Community Impact for the Greater Twin Cities United Way in Minneapolis. And then in 2018, Meghan was named President and CEO of the United Way of Greenville County in South Carolina, becoming the very first woman to lead the organization in its nearly 100-year history. She partners with civic, business, and nonprofit leaders to ensure that the nearly 60,000 people in the area experiencing poverty have the ability to improve their upward economic mobility. She recently co-founded the Race Equity and Economic Mobility Commission and the COVID-19 Community Relief Fund. Meghan's nature to give back goes beyond her role, as she has served as a speaker and presenter for a variety of conferences and events, and is also active on numerous committees, councils, and boards. In 2014, Meghan was named to the top 40 under 40 Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal, and was recognized as one of Greenville Business Magazine's 50 most influential in 2018 and 19. This past October, Meghan was recognized as a UNK Alumni Association Distinguished Alumna. I have read recently somewhere that great leaders work for the greater good, and after getting to know Meghan these past few months, I can tell you that she truly embodies that every single day. Please help me welcome Meghan Barp.
Trish, thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you and to see everybody on today. Thanks for inviting me.
So Meghan, if you would, tell us a little bit about why you chose to come to UNK. And then when you were at UNK, what or who was it that helped you grow and look for the bigger and broader opportunities?
Yeah, thank you, Trish. So some of you have heard this before, and some of you know where Kimball, Nebraska is, being many of you from Nebraska, which I love, right in the panhandle close to Wyoming and Colorado on I-80. So I went to UNK as a senior for Foreign Language Day, and I didn't put a lot of thought into sort of where I wanted to go, and I wasn't doing a lot of college visits, and I didn't have a lot of that encouragement of sort of exploring that in my senior year. And I arrived on campus and it just felt right to me. You know, you walk on and you feel that connectivity with the people and sort of the campus, and that just really resonated with me. And so I applied. And it was actually the only place that I applied, and I got in. And so I arrived in the fall of 1994. And one of the things that really captivated me about being in Kearney right away was something pretty surprising to me, actually, which was a very diverse campus. I loved the international population at UNK and got pretty involved with a variety of students from a lot of different places. For those of you who remember 10,000 Villages, I know it's no longer there, but I volunteered there early on with Lorma Weedy, who was a phenomenal mentor to me. And that just really broadened my perspective quickly into this worldview that I was always curious about, but I didn't feel like I had access to. So that was a really powerful moment for me of exploring things outside of my comfort zone, outside of my own worldview of growing up in Kimball. So that was it was a win-win all the way around when I joined as a student that fall of 94.
So we talked about this recently, and I know a lot of people on the call will resonate with this next question that I have for you. But as you started out your career as a young woman, and you probably still are, all of us face it yet today, I'm sure there were many labels that were applied to you. And we joked a little bit about, you're just a girl from a small town in Nebraska. And I think a lot of us resonate there. What helped you tear off those labels and establish yourself as a professional?
It's so funny, Trish. I've been reflecting on this a lot, thinking about, the different cities that I've lived in and the different experiences that I've had throughout my career and my personal life as well. And I think when I was starting out, a couple of things. One, I think I sort of lacked self-awareness of how I was showing up in these different environments. So that I think was a benefit to a certain extent, because I didn't see myself as this small town Nebraska girl, but certainly, recognize that I showed up in that way a little bit. I think one of the most important things for me as I reflect on that also, though, is that I got feedback very specifically and professionally early on that was really sort of instrumental in shaping me as a leader today. And not just how I lead, but also how I show up. And a great example that I have of that is when I started out in New York, and I'd gone from, Kearney to Oregon to New York. I thought I would be in New York for a summer and ended up staying for 10 years or so. And I was working at the YWCA, and my title was Director of Youth Services, but it was really a glorified summer camp director. I found myself in Midtown, 200 kids coming from all over. So as you might imagine, I'm running around, I'm in very much summer camp mode. And as I was coming out of that, the CEO at the time, Ray Lenevsky, who's a phenomenal mentor and friend to this day, it was probably October. And she was like, Megan, and she was very direct. And, I had probably 10 layers between me and Ray at that time in the role that I was in. She said, Megan, stop wearing Birkenstocks. Summer is over. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I never thought about that. I never thought about how I was dressing, for my job or showing up as a professional. And so really being open to that feedback early on and taking that in and seeking that out of like, oh, right, this is how people are perceiving me in this space. And if I want to continue to grow and lead, I need to think about how others are perceiving me. So feedback like that early on was really helpful to me as a professional. As I think about this now, the work that we do in Greenville, the work that I've done in other communities, it's so dang important. So I think about, you mentioned this, Trish, the nearly 60,000 people who are experiencing poverty every single day. I'm so focused on that and how I bring together community members and others around that. I sometimes forget that those perceptions are barriers. And, I have a couple of women here who said to me early on, oh, you're that United Way girl, aren't you? And I just thought, oh, that's where they're coming from. That's who they are. I didn't realize until I got here, actually, that I am the first woman to lead United Way. I just didn't think about it. I was ready to lead. I think of myself as a leader. I don't think of myself as a woman leader. So that was an interesting sort of nugget there too, for me to take that in and think about that. I have tried to be more intentional though, about how might, that influence how I show up for other people, or what do I need to consider within that, recognizing that some people see that as a barrier or a limitation. but I think one of my strengths is I haven't let that slow me down or stop me. I try to understand it and then navigate around it or through it to continue to be successful and represent the people that, you know, may not have a seat at the table to create change.
Wonderful. We're going to take a break and we're going to ask a poll question here. Let's see if I can get this to launch. So for you, do you currently or have you in the past worked for a nonprofit or some type of service agency? Just another minute here. Okay. Share the results. All right, there you go. We have 70% have some kind of nonprofit experience, either today or in the past. All right, so that leads us to the next question I have for you. And you know, thinking of all these things that you did through your education and things, when did you know a career in service and in the nonprofit world was the right direction for you?
I think I knew early on, Trish. I grew up in a family that was very community oriented. Reflecting back now on my childhood, you know, I didn't know that my family struggled to make ends meet. My parents were pretty good at keeping that between them and trying to give us the best opportunity to succeed. They always made room to give to people who had less than we did. So that was sort of an orientation of my family early on, whether it was, you know, pulling up another chair to the dinner table of somebody who would have dinner with us, or, you know, volunteering in Kimball in some way. That was just hardwired, I would say, into us. My very first job in Kimball was working at the public library, and I love libraries. They also attract people from all walks of life, all sorts of experiences, all sorts of, you know, sort of things that people are going through. And I connected more deeply with my community at that point. You know, I started there at 14, so I didn't have a skill set or sort of the tools needed, but I certainly was an open mind and open ears to people who just needed to chat with someone. So that really, I love that aspect of that, and that really resonated with me. And, you know, being in Kearney, I thought originally I maybe wanted to be a teacher. So I tried that on for a little while, and then really sort of landed in the human development component of the work. And I just knew that I had to give back in some way and make that part of my career. So every chance I got, I was seeking out opportunities to volunteer or opportunities to learn something new. I can't stress enough the power of internships, the power of trying different things on. I did a lot of that in Kearney, in Oregon, in New York, and I learned a lot. I didn't want to be part of a small grassroots nonprofit. They play a very, very important role, but it just wasn't for me. I liked being part of something bigger at that systems level. I worked very briefly as an intern over a summer for the International Criminal Court's Women's Caucus for Gender Justice, which is a mouthful. That was not for me. It was a bunch of very, very smart lawyers and attorneys or lawyers working on really important policy work. That's great. That's needed. It wasn't for me. So, you know, I knew that I had to find sort of my right spot within the nonprofit sector. Full disclosure, I did work for a for-profit for one day. It was in New York. I went through this long interview process. I got the job. It was working for a very well-known video game company. And the vibe was just not for me. And I said, you know what, like, I just couldn't do it. And then shortly thereafter, I went to, you know, the YW, which really was the right fit. So, you know, it's just about trying different things on, but I think I'm deeply wired to give back to my community and do my part to hopefully leave this world in a little bit of a better place.
Wonderful. Okay, we have another poll here, if I can get it. Go, maybe. Oh, oh no. There we go. For any of you right now, especially maybe we have a couple students with us. Are you interested in transitioning to a nonprofit career? A couple more seconds here to make your decision. Either yes, no, or not sure. Okay, we'll end that. And it looks like there's some interest there. So Megan, maybe you've got some potential mentors here or mentees here.
Love it. Yeah, listen, truly, I'm always excited to talk about a career in the nonprofit sector. So I know, Trish, you will share my contact information. Would love to chat with you, those of you who are interested, for sure.
All right. So thinking about your role now with the United Way of Greenville, you had mentioned that you were the first woman to serve as president. And you mentioned just a little bit of some of the challenges, but can you share a few more of those challenges and what helped you overcome them?
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting, Trish, as I think about sort of my path of the different communities that I've lived in. When I arrived in Greenville, which is a phenomenal community, one of the things that I probably didn't spend enough time considering or preparing for is just the newness of it all, right? Greenville is a rapidly growing city, by the way. There was a great feature on 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago about Greenville, if you're interested, called The Big Quit, about just the great resignation that we're seeing and challenges that Greenville's facing. It's an incredible community. It's also a relatively small community. So when I came here, it was a pretty high profile role. My predecessor had been in this role for 17 or 18 years. And so it was a sort of big splash that was made about my arrival. And I had no relationships. I didn't know the community. I hadn't yet established myself in that. And this work, like so many of our jobs, is all about relationships. So the hardest part for me was I'd worked so hard and had a great reputation in Minneapolis, worked so hard and had the same in New York. I had to start almost from zero again, but being in a really high profile job, right? So that, I think, was my hardest part of this transition, is building that credibility, building those relationships, learning a new town, learning new sort of the politics of things as well. So that I would say was probably my biggest challenge. The good news is I love a good challenge. So that I didn't shy away from that at all. And I'm just about to start my 5th year here in Greenville, and it feels really good. Like, we're getting stuff done. I know the right people to call. I know the right people to connect with. And I've built that credibility. But I would say that was the biggest challenge that I saw sort of coming in. I joke often that United Way is a publicly traded nonprofit because of the way that we raise our money, the way that we invest our money. So everyone has an opinion. So, that has been a really important part of making sure that people feel heard, but that we also continue to move the work forward. So just getting on my feet here and getting established and sort of putting some of those roots down, I would say, was the biggest challenge. On a more sort of organizational level, the big challenge was, I sometimes refer to United Way of Greenville County as a 100-year-old startup. I inherited an organization that somebody once said, it was Sleeping Beauty. Somebody took a bite out of the apple in the 1980s and she hadn't woken up yet. And so I've had to transform a lot organizationally of changing our culture and updating our technology and our operations and making some really hard decisions that were pretty public. So that was, I would say, my big challenge of getting to know a new community, but having some urgency around being a change agent right after I got here.
I'm curious a little bit about how you were accepted in the South. Because I know that some of that exists. I had a brother who took a job in one of the Carolinas a long time ago, and he was not accepted very well because he was not from that area. I was just curious, did you feel any of that?
Oh man, I didn't, honestly. And I have a few sort of hunches as to why that is. One is I came into Greenville accepting Greenville for what it is. So I didn't come in with, it has to be like Minneapolis, or it has to be like New York, or it has to be like Corvallis. I really came in trying to understand and appreciate and accept Greenville for what it is. So that's number one for me, and getting to know people and understanding where they're coming from. The second is that I sometimes think about Greenville and our region as a new South city, meaning that it has all the charm of the South, which there's a lot of charm here, but it's also progressive in the sense that we have BMW North America headquartered here. We have Michelin North America headquartered here. We have a tremendous amount of national and international business headquartered here. So for those of you who've been to Greenville, or if you got on a flight to Greenville, you would hear multiple languages. You would see a real diversity that is pretty unique to our region, that I think allowed me to not only accept Greenville for what it is, but to also bring all of my strengths and skill sets to this region that allow us to move the work forward. So I love being here. When I first announced that and started sharing that my husband Shane and I were relocating to Greenville, people were like, "What are you thinking? You're moving to the South." And I think there's such a perception outside of the South that we're backwards, that we have all these issues, that it's, hillbillies. And I feel like I have my own mission at this point to like debunk that, because it is wonderful here, not without our issues, right? We have a lot of issues, just like we do nationally, in any community, but man, it's pretty special here. So I think for me, it's accepting Greenville for what it is, celebrating what it's not yet, but trying to move us towards that, and partnering with like-minded folks and people who don't think like I do to create that kind of change.
I think that's really good to keep in mind, no matter if you are moving to a new community or you're changing jobs or you're just changing roles. So I think what you just said applies to all of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, Trish. And I see, Jane, I see your question pop up too on sort of the programs and partnerships. Yes, we have phenomenal partnerships with Furman. Dr. Davis, President Davis is on our board at United Way. Partnerships with Clemson. We have partnerships with Greenville Tech. We do a lot around education, financial stability. Vibrant and equitable communities is another area that we focus on, of real community engagement. And our educational institutions of all types are such a huge, huge part of the work that we do here. So that's instrumental to getting things done. I'm a big believer that not one organization can get this work done.
Well, that leads into the next question. If you would please share a few examples of how you work with your community to address issues, figure out what those issues are, address them, and then lead in positive ways.
So our focus at United Way is we do a few things. One is we raise money from our community and we invest in the absolute best nonprofits who are able to move the needle on education, financial stability, and ensuring that our community is vibrant and equitable. And if there's no one doing the work and there's a big need in our community, we roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves. So we do something called Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, VITA. That's a federal program. Many of you have probably heard of it, to help people that are to prepare their taxes if they're making $60,000 or less. So we do that for the entire upstate of South Carolina. We also do something called On Track Greenville, which is an education program that works with Greenville County schools to make sure that kids are on track for high school graduation and post-secondary success, working with families there as well. And then Trish, you referenced this when we started. We're actually pretty deep into race equity work here in Greenville as well. And that's been a surprise for my friends and colleagues outside of South Carolina, of like, wait a minute, you moved from Minneapolis and you're doing race equity work in South Carolina. That has been, I would say, some of the most profound and deep work that we've done in the last 18 months. It's a partnership with the Greenville Chamber of Commerce and the Urban League of the Upstate here to get very clear and bold about the deep racial inequities that we are experiencing in Greenville County. And it's things like, the school to prison pipeline that we're seeing within many, many school systems around the country. The data showing that our Black and Brown students are expelled or suspended at outsized rates compared to their white counterparts. So really working with the community to focus on that. Medicaid expansion. South Carolina is one of the few states that did not take the incentives to expand Medicaid to as many South Carolinians as possible. So we're working on that. We have something called the South Carolina Fair Credit Lending Act, which is capping interest rates at 36%, which I know sounds insane, but South Carolina has no cap on interest rates. So predatory lending is a really big problem. We're one of the worst states for predatory lending. So we're focusing on that as well through some of this work. So we're taking, I would say, a pretty bold approach to ensuring that people who are not included economically in many ways and don't have a shot at success, to change that in a very meaningful way. And I often say that it's very expensive to be poor. And once you get behind on not being able to pay your electric bill or falling behind on your rent, or maybe you have an eviction on your record, it makes it really, really hard to dig out of that. Even if you're working 1 to 2 jobs, which many of the people that we're serving are. So, we're focused on the most pressing issues in those areas, trying to make game-changing strategies work for the better, and not just the Band-Aid fixes. I'm really interested in what are those upstream solutions? What are those systems that need to change to make it possible so that more and more people can be successful and self-sufficient? So that's a really important aspect of the work. So policy and advocacy is a big deal around that, but also being credible and relevant and having an opinion about how we do that. And that's relatively new for a lot of United Ways in that space, but it's an area where we've been able to see some growth and some gains, but it takes a long time, right? It's long haul work that we're focused on.
We're going to wrap up our main questions here and open it to some additional questions here in just a few minutes. But before we get to those other questions, what are some key takeaways from your experiences that you want to share with everyone joining us today?
Yeah, Trish, it's so fun to reflect on this, because I think about, if you would have told 1994 Kimball, Nebraska Meghan, in 27 years, you'll be living in Greenville, South Carolina, running United Way as CEO and working on significant issues, I probably would have found that entertaining and wouldn't have necessarily believed it. And I've had great adventures along the way. And I feel so fortunate for being able to live in so many different communities and be part of important work happening in different ways. Part of what allowed me to have those experiences is that I was curious. I often said yes. I remember when I called my parents and said, I'm going to go to New York for the summer and, leave my stuff in Oregon. And they were like, what are you thinking? We'll never come visit you. Come home right away. Someone will murder you. Like, they had this whole picture sort of planted in their mind. I think for me to be able to go and say, I'm going to try it, and then say, gosh, like, I have this job opportunity that I didn't expect to get. So I'm just going to stay here and work. And, I look back on that and I think, gosh, what courage. And probably I was a little bit plus naive in some cases, But just putting myself in different experiences and saying, well, let me try this and see what happens. That 9 times out of 10 has served me very, very well. So just trusting my gut, really trying something different and exploring that has been really important. I mentioned my 1-day stint in the corporate world. I often say to people, and young women in particular, I think it's so important to know your values, what you stand for, what's important to you, what are your non-negotiables, but to also know your value. I can't tell you, and I know there are so many women on this call, women still don't negotiate by and large. So as you think about what's important to you in a job that you're in or a job that you're considering, not only is it the right fit for you, but gosh, are you getting compensated in the way that you should be? Do you have the benefits that you want within that also? So that negotiation, I talk to so many folks who say, well, if I negotiate, that might mean that I don't get the job. And that's just a standard part of business. So that's been a really important sort of tidbit that I've passed along also. And I've by far not always gotten what I wanted in that, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And it also sets that tone. I can't say enough about seeking out mentors from all walks of life who can help really give you candid feedback. One of my bosses in the Twin Cities, Ben Knoll, who is also a Nebraskan and a good friend and truly was a champion of me as a leader. At one point, he sat me down and he was like, Megan, sometimes you are a bull in a china shop. And I need to give you this feedback because I want you to be successful. And not only was it helpful feedback, but I was so receptive to hearing that because I wanted to hear how I could change that. I wanted to hear how I could get better. So really seeking out ways to accept that feedback, push yourself even when it's uncomfortable to receive that. I'm like, nobody wants to be a bull in a china shop. At least I don't think so. I didn't want to be one, but I love that feedback that I got so that I knew next time, how not to show up that way and how to maybe have a little bit more finesse. So for me, it's curiosity, it's learning, it's growing. I'm always pushing myself to learn and find new ways to grow as a leader. And that's just been invaluable in the different experiences that I've had. If I wouldn't have been open, I got the phone call, by the way, about Greenville at my desk. I was in the Twin Cities and I got the phone call and somebody said, would you be interested in this role? And I was like, oh gosh, Greenville, South Carolina. Let me Google that to see where it is because I had never been here. And I remember getting home that night and my husband, Shane, who's on this call as well. I said, gosh, I got this interesting phone call today about a CEO role in Greenville, South Carolina. Like, I wonder who would be interested in that. And he was like, Megan, you would be interested in this. Like, you're ready. Like, check it out. Like, at least try it, go for it, explore it. And I was like, oh, right. Like, I am interested in this. So obviously, long story short, that worked out. But if I wouldn't have been curious or if I would have been so locked into what I thought I needed to be doing in my career, I would have missed out on some great adventures along the way. So that served me really, really well as I've been able to do a lot of different and fun things along the way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan. We're going to open it up to some questions now, some Q&A with Megan. So please, you can either unmute and ask, or you can use the chat, either way.
A quick question for you, Megan.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
Gosh, Sophia, that's such a good question. I think what I would have said as I was starting out my career is that it is all going to work out, right? And I say that to say I spent a lot of time early on worrying about a lot of things, like wondering if things would work out, wanting certain things to work out that didn't necessarily go the way that I wanted them to. But ultimately, as I reflect on some of those things of like, gosh, I really wanted this and it didn't happen. I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness that didn't happen because I would have missed out on, this other experience. So really, I think that was part of it for me is like, it's all going to work out and be okay. And then I know this has almost become like a cliche statement at this point, but I can't say enough about trusting your gut. Like there have been times where I thought I wanted to do something and I've had really good mentors along the way who would ask me a really pointed question of like, what do you really want out of this? And if I'm honest with myself, I'd be like, gosh, it's not that, it's actually this. And so seeking that clarity and sitting with that, I think was important to me too. So, knowing that things will be okay and work out and trusting your gut are two things that I wish I could have just told past Meghan a bit more on this journey.
We did have a question submitted on via email to us. Where do you get your strength and motivation from day to day? What helps motivate you?
Yes. Shane, you're on this call. I saw you just on a minute ago. I have an incredible husband who is so supportive and so truly wonderful, and a partner that I can't thank him enough for his support and what he does. He's my biggest champion, my biggest fan, my hype guy when I'm having a bad day. It's the best. So that has been important. I also have 3 incredible daughters, thanks to Shane, who they live with their mom in Ohio and then spend a lot of time here in Greenville as well. And they are 15, 14, and 10. They are the light of my life. I love those girls. And so, that's something too, for me, I feel a real responsibility in, showing up for them and being a great bonus mom to them as well. So that is my sort of foundation, I would say, of rooting me in who I am. So that's a really, really important aspect of my life, and such a cool part of my life that I never anticipated for myself. So that's a big one. When I'm having my days of like, oh, why did I sign up for this? What am I doing? Is this the right thing? I have a great network of women, primarily, who are on speed dial, speed text, FaceTime, you name it, where I can just commiserate and or get motivation from them. So that's been a huge part of my life. I can't stress that enough. We need our people around us when we're having those moments, and that's been a big piece of it too. And then the final thing I'll say out of that, my biggest motivation is the people that we are trying to serve in Greenville County. I feel a real responsibility, and it's such an honor to be in the role that I'm in, to do everything I can to ensure that people have access to the resources they need. And during COVID-19, I was out and about a lot, actually chatting with people, and it's hardworking people who are trying to do the right thing for their family and who in many cases have just fallen behind. I have such an incredible platform to do something to improve lives, and I don't take that lightly. So that's a huge motivation. When I'm down, I'm like, gosh, there's a lot of work to do and I better get after it, because people are counting on me and counting on United Way to do something. So those are my motivators for sure.
Thank you. A couple questions in the chat. Joyce asked what Meghan's involvement has been with Gold Torch Society. There hasn't been any yet, but maybe that's something that we can change in the future.
Yes, Joyce, I love that question. And I love that you have a Greenville connection also. So when you're here, let's go have lunch. I would love to chat. And Trish, I would love to get more involved. I have really appreciated the role that UNK has played in my life, and being more connected recently has been really lovely as well.
And then Hilke said, you've made so many great points today regarding your biggest challenges. How did you go about immersing yourself in Greenville and building your reputation and getting involved when you first moved? For example, did you go to chamber events, volunteering, religious organizations, etc., all while trying to get settled into your new role?
Yes, I had a wonderful board chair in my first year, David Lominack, who continues to be a phenomenal board member and partner. And he was, I joke with him now, he was on speed dial every single day for me, I think, as I got oriented here. He helped introduce me to so many people in the community. So that was wonderful. I connected with leaders from all over, whether it was corporate, nonprofit, our faith-based community, which you referenced as well. That was really important for me to sit down and get to know people. And then from there, I sort of identified my key partners. So I think about Carlos Phillips, who runs the chamber here. He's not from Greenville either. He's a great guy, a great partner to me. So I quickly sort of connected in there. But one of the things that I learned a long time ago as I was getting to know people is at the end of the conversation, I would say, okay, who are the 3 people that you would recommend that I connect with that I should get to know? And will you introduce me? And truly, people love to do that. They love to connect you with others. So as I just kept going, getting to know people and connecting, I just kept doing that. I spent probably my first year, and I can't tell you how many happy hours, lunches, breakfasts, dinners, in whatever way possible. And that just, you just can't go wrong with that, because truly our work comes down to relationships. And that was really beneficial. What I had to figure out for myself, which, Shane will probably unmute on this and say, I haven't figured this out yet, is that I don't have an off switch. That's really hard for me because I'm so passionate about what I do, because there's so much work to be done. I have a really hard time flipping that off and just being Meghan. So that's a 2022 plus goal for me. But that's something that I'm still learning within that. So that's been an important part. And I'm looking, Meghan, at your question also. The future of work in Erie County. Oh my gosh, if you can figure this out and crack the code, Meghan, that would be awesome in terms of how to prepare for younger generations entering the workforce. I think there's such a dynamic shift happening nationally right now around the way we work and how we get work done and how we approach that generationally. There are some really interesting efforts going on around the country that are focused on this. And that's what I would recommend that you look at in terms of other cities doing this. And I'll try to think of some resources on that front as well that might be able to help you. Yeah, I would love to see it when it's completed. And if you have other thoughts on that, feel free to unmute and chat with me about it.
Again, I have a question. This is Kathy Itak. I have a question. I know you said you work primarily supporting underrepresented populations. How did you go about building trust with a community who perhaps doesn't see you as one of them? Because I think sometimes that's a struggle, especially for women anyway. So I'm just curious as to how you build that trust, and how did you work with your current staff to have them also understand the importance of doing this type of work?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You are 100% spot on that trust building is so important. And we've approached that in a couple of ways. One is we had a really terrific partnership with Furman University around something called the Neighborhood Change Study. And we engaged people from communities, so the faith-based community, but also neighborhood coalitions, trusted partners in those communities to really understand the needs more deeply and, more importantly, the solutions. So we did a lot of work around that, of engaging those communities in very specific ways. The other piece of that work, which I think is really, really important, is what I have done in 4 years with United Way is, one, I've diversified my board like crazy. When I got here, and we have a big board of, probably 45 plus members at this point. It was probably about 78% white male bankers. And I love my bankers. I love my guys. They're great. But it was really heavily weighted towards that. So I had to do a lot of diversification on the board to make sure that we had different ages, different neighborhoods, race, ethnicity, professions, you name it. Like, we really looked at that very strategically. And so it's much more diverse now. But I also did that specifically with my team. So I was really thoughtful about bringing new people in that represented different communities, had much different backgrounds than my own, who had relationships and had built trust within the community as well. But what you're touching on is everyday work, 365 days a year, because that kind of trust building is so critical if we actually want to create that change. And I also believe, and I say this all the time at United Way, the solutions are often closest to the communities that we're trying to improve, right? I don't say that I have all the solutions. I do think that people in our underserved communities absolutely know what they need. They just don't have access to the resources, right? So that's a shift, I think, from classic philanthropy and the way that we've looked at things. But that community engagement is so important, and figuring out who the champions are, who the trusted partners are. One of my closest friends and colleagues is Pastor Sean Dogan, who runs the Long Branch Baptist Church here, which is the sort of oldest African-American Baptist church in Greenville. And, you know, pre-COVID, I would occasionally attend service there with him and his congregation, but he also has really helped, you know, open doors and build credibility within that also. So that's been a really important piece of the work, is who are the champions that are trusted that you can rely upon.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Last call for questions. Brenda would like to know if you have had the opportunity to meet Dawn Staley, the head coach for the University of South Carolina basketball. She's a huge champion for opportunities and inclusiveness for all.
I have not met Dawn, but I would love to. I would love to.
Well, I'm not really camera ready today. I was just planning on listening in, but I'm actually doing a broadcast at the University of South Carolina on Monday night. And so just that I figured this must be, I was supposed to do a game tonight that got canceled because of COVID. So I got to listen in. And so, you know, if this is an opportunity for me to make an introduction, I'd be glad to do that.
I would love that, Brenda. And but you're totally camera ready. What are you talking about? You look great. You look great. Yes, I would love an introduction. Thank you.
Well, maybe somebody at the alumni office can connect us as far as email addresses, and I'd be glad to talk with you offline.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you.
I will take care of that for you, Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish.
Thanks, Trish.
Any other questions that you have for Meghan or comments that you'd like to share with her? And we will share all of the Meghan's contact information. We will also share a recording of this as well. So if you'd like to go back and listen, because I think I'm going to have to go back and listen again, because I think you've had some great points in here.
Yeah, thank you, Trish. I appreciate that. And I did get a private message asking if I would share with the group how ethics in business is so critical, especially in our line of work. And gosh, I can't say enough about this. Just thinking about the world that we're living in today and how divisive things are, that drives every single thing that we do. And transparency and openness has been huge, and I think will continue to be a key driver of our work. And I will often say, and this has come up a million times in my career, but it is who I am at my core, which I also think is tied to me being a Nebraskan and just our like hard work ethic that we have in the Midwest. You know, doing the right thing is often the hard thing. And, you know, I've sat with a lot of really tough decisions over my career of like, gosh, this is going to be really hard, but it is absolutely the right thing to do. And you might get flack for it. People might not see it the way that you see it, but that again has served me well, I would say, in my career as well. And I'm a huge fan, by the way, of Brene Brown. I don't know if any of you have read her new book, Atlas of the Heart. She has so many great books. One of my favorites is also Dare to Lead. And I really value the way that she talks about leadership and authenticity. And so much of that to me is tied to ethical leadership, which again, I think is just central to credibility and being able to get our work accomplished. But it definitely feels like a divisive time, and there's a lot of gray in that area right now, it feels like.
Well, thank you so much, Meghan, for joining us today and sharing all of your thoughts. I think it's been wonderful, and we truly appreciate it. For all of our alumni who are on today, I'm going to do a quick drawing here. I've got my random drawing button. And we're going to do a little prize here. I can find somebody who's on. Sorry, it's taking a second. The people who get the number. Sorry. Winner of a gift prize is Kendra Wilcox. Kendra, I will send you a direct message here in just a moment.
Well, thank you. That's fantastic. Made my day.
Great. All right. Like I mentioned before, this is the first in a series. Our next Lopers in Leadership speaker will be Mary Vaughn in March. Mary is a 1978 UNK graduate, and she is also a Distinguished Alumni Award recipient. Her topic will be the advantages that women have in leadership roles. We'll be setting that date very soon and hope you will be able to join us. To wrap us up today, I'm going to turn things over to Lucas Dart, who is our Vice President of Alumni Relations and Development.
I'm so thrilled by this. Meghan, you did a great job. I think it's really neat for us to be able to hear stories of our alums around the country that are doing great things, impacting their communities and representing UNK, whether that's your intent, you do it every day, and we're proud of you. And so it is a great kickoff to this series that we're doing. But I'm so appreciative also of everybody who joined us today. And, you know, again, I talk about this a lot. If you hear me, our alumni base is really, really important at the University of Nebraska-Kearney. And so many of you can do things that are just little, that you might not think is a big deal, that really help UNK. And it's telling people about things like this and getting them to join on with us. And it's telling potential students about the university and what's going on. And if you're taking time to listen to what the news is from the campus and the improvements that are happening and all those things, they help us when you share that. You're our ambassadors and we could not appreciate you more. So we hope you'll encourage your friends to say, hey, this was a great program. Another one's coming up. Encourage them to join on. And when we have events, and it sounds to me like we need to have a South Carolina alumni gathering. We need to have one in Erie, Pennsylvania. I don't know how many alums we got in Erie, but the other Meghan can help us coordinate that when the time comes. But anyway, there are Lopers everywhere. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for what's going on at the university. And I just want to underscore your importance and express our gratitude for your participation. So with that, I'll bid you all a great day. We got it done in an hour, but it was absolutely full of content that could have gone beyond that. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Meghan.
Thanks, everybody. Good to spend time with you.